Humperdinck screamed toward her then, ripping at her autumn hair, yanking her from her feet and down the long curving corridor to her room, where he tore that door open and threw her inside and locked her there and started running for the underground entrance to the Zoo of Death, and down he plunged, giant stride after giant stride. And when he threw the door of the 5th level cage open, even Count Rugen was startled at the purity of whatever the emotion was that reflected in the prince's eyes. The prince moved to Wesley. "She loves you," the prince cried. "She loves you still, and you love her, so think of that. Think of this, too. In all this world, you might have been happy, genuinely happy. Not one couple in a century has that chance. Not really, no matter what the storybooks say, but you could have had it. And so, I would think, no one will ever suffer a loss as great as you." And with that, he grabbed the dial and pushed it all the way forward, and the count cried, "Not to 20." But by then, it was too late. The death scream had started. It was much worse than the scream of the wild dog. In the first place, the dial for the wild dog had only been set at 6, whereas this was more than triple that. And so, naturally enough, it was more than 3 times as long, and more than 3 times as loud. But none of this really was why it was worse. It was the scream from a human throat that made the difference. In her chamber, Buttercup heard it, and it frightened her, but she had not the least idea what it was. By the main door of the castle, Yellin heard it, and it also frightened him, though he couldn't imagine what it was either. All the 100 brutes and fighters flanked by the main door heard it too, and to a man they were bothered by it, and they talked it over for quite a while, but none of them had any sound notions as to what it might have been. The great square was filled with common people excited about the coming wedding and anniversary, and they all heard it too, and no one even made the pretense of not being scared. But again, none of them knew at all what it might have been. The death scream rose higher in the night. All the streets leading into the square were also filled with citizens, all trying to crowd into the square, and they heard it, but once they admitted they were petrified, they gave up trying to guess what it might have been. Inigo knew immediately. In the tiny alley that he and Fezzik were trying to force their way through, he stopped, remembering. The alley led to the streets that led to the square, and the alley was jammed too. "I don't like that sound," Fezzik said, his skin, for the moment, cold. Inigo grabbed the giant, and the words began pouring out. "Fezzik, Fezzik, that is the sound of ultimate suffering. I know that sound. That was the sound in my heart when Count Rugen slaughtered my father and I saw him fall. The man in black makes it now." "You think that's him? Who else has cause for ultimate suffering this celebration night?" And with that he started to follow the sound. But the crowds were in his way, and he was strong, but he was thin, and he cried, "Fezzik, Fezzik, we must track that sound. We must trace it to its source, and I cannot move, so you must lead me. Fly, Fezzik, this is Inigo begging you. Make a path, please." Well, Fezzik had rarely had anyone beg him for anything, least of all Inigo. And when something like that happened, you did what you could. So Fezzik, without waiting, began to push. Forward. Lots of people. Fezzik pushed harder. Lots of people began to move. Out of Fezzik's way. Fast. The death scream was starting to fade now, fading in the clouds. "Fezzik," said Inigo, "all your power, now." Down the alley Fezzik ran, people screaming and diving to get out of his way, and in his footsteps Inigo kept pace, and at the end of the alley was a street, and the scream was fainter now, but Fezzik turned left, and into the middle of the street he went, and he owned it. No one was in his way, nothing dared block his way, and the scream was getting just so hard to hear. So with all his might, Fezzik roared, "Quiet!" And the street was suddenly hushed, and Fezzik pounded along, Inigo right behind, and the scream was still there, still faintly there, and into the great square itself and the castle beyond before the scream was gone. Wesley lay dead by the machine. The prince kept the dial by the 20 mark, long, long after it was necessary, until the count said, "Done." The prince left without another look at Wesley. He took the secret underground stairs 4 at a time. "She actually called me a coward," he said, and then he was gone from sight. Time for bed. If the VOD is available, I'll finish tomorrow. Good night. Good night, Jen. Thanks for hanging out with us. Count Rugen started taking notes. Then he threw his quill pen down. He tested Wesley briefly. Then he shook his head. Death was not of any intellectual interest to him at all. When you were dead, you couldn't react to pain. The Count said, "Dispose of the body," because even though he couldn't see the albino, he knew the albino was there. It was really a shame, he realized, as he mounted the stairs after the prince. You just didn't come across victims like Wesley every day of the year. When they were gone, the albino came out, pulled the cups from the corpse, decided to burn the body on the garbage pyre back behind the castle, which meant a wheelbarrow. He hurried up the underground stairs, came out the secret entrance, moved quickly to the main tool shed. All the wheelbarrows were buried back at the rear wall, behind the hoes and rakes and hedge trimmers. The albino made a hissing sound of displeasure and began to pick his way past all the other equipment. This kind of thing always seemed to happen to him when he was in a hurry. The albino hissed again. Extra work all the time. Wouldn't you just know it? He finally got the barrow out and was just passing the false and deadly supposed main entrance to the zoo when... "I'm having the devil's own trouble tracking that scream," was spoken to him, and the albino whirled to find there in the castle grounds, a blade-thin stranger with a sword in his hand. The sword suddenly flicked its way to the albino's throat. "Where is the man in black?" the swordsman said then. He had a giant scar slanting down each cheek, and seemed like no one to trifle with. Whispered, "I know no man in black." "Did the scream come from that place?" The fellow indicated the main entrance. "Nod." "And the throat it came from?" "I need this man, so be quick." Whispered, "Wesley." Inigo reasoned. "A sailor, brought here by Rugen." Nod. "And I reach him where?" The albino hesitated, then pointed to the deadly entrance. Whispered, "He is on the bottom level, 5 levels down." "Then I have no more need for you. Quiet him a while, Fezzik." From behind him, the albino was aware of a giant shadow moving. Funny, he thought. The last thing he remembered. I thought that was a tree. Inigo was on fire now. There was no stopping him. Fezzik hesitated by the main door. Why would he tell the truth? He's a zookeeper threatened with death. Why would he lie? That doesn't follow. "I don't care," Inigo said sharply, and in fact he didn't. He knew in his heart the man in black was down there. There was no other reason for Fezzik to find him. For Fezzik to know of Rugen. There was no other reason for Fezzik to find him, for Fezzik to know of Rugen, for everything to be coming together after so many years of waiting. If there was a god, then there was a man in black waiting. Inigo knew that. He knew it. And of course he was absolutely right. But again, of course, there were many things he did not know. That the man in black was dead, for one. That the entrance they were taking was the wrong one, for another, a false one, set up to foil those like himself who did not belong. There were spitting cobras down there, though what would actually come at him would be worse. These things he did not know either. But his father had to be revenged, and the man in black would figure out how. That was enough for Inigo. And so, with an urgency that would soon turn to deep regret, he and Fezzik approached the Zoo of Death. Well, I don't know what's going to happen to them in the Zoo of Death, but at least they're on a track to get there. They are on their way, and you just know, just like knowing that the main characters have to have their happy ending, the side characters also have to prevail in a certain way in order to accomplish the things that they're also setting out to do. Because, yeah, they're not the main characters, but they also have to have satisfying arcs. So I'm going to put my faith in that as a storyteller. But also, I'm worried about the Zoo of Death because I really don't remember it in the movie, so I don't know if they really put a lot of emphasis on that. So, who knows what's going to happen. But it wasn't in the movie, at all? Did they even, mention the name of it? I do remember the Pit of Despair, yeah. Which, I mean, the pit of despair makes more sense for like what actually happened there, but the zoo of death, I feel like, uh, I don't know. There's something about a zoo, like a collection of animals, especially like scary animals, seems like it's really fitting for the character of Humperdinck. But the pit of despair is definitely like more accurate, I think, or at least more accurate for what Wesley was going through. The zoo of death fits the book Humperdinck. Yeah. Yeah, the pit of despair was the counts in the movie. Oh, okay. Well, that fits the count. That fits like the book version of the count, I think. Cuz he's not really concerned with death. He's concerned with how like agony affects a person. The movie separated the torture from the prince. Yeah, the book tried to because he made that promise to Buttercup, and then he was like, I won't hurt him. I'm just going to watch. So like he sort of in the book was separated from it as well. But yeah, I think the movie um I don't think he's even in a lot of the scenes, the torture scenes. The only one is at the end, the one we just read. Yeah. I do remember that part where he's just like, I give up and throw it all to the like, take 20 years off his life or whatever it is. I'm, I keep saying this, I'm really enjoying this book a lot. I'm aware of like bringing up the movie a lot as well. I think, um, I mean, I think it has to do with being an actor and like making short films and stuff on my own and like kind of trying to understand um, all the different ways of storytelling, like just like visual, costuming can tell a story, set design can tell a story, and just like wanting to like kind of do a compare and contrast. Um, I do think I would like to read a book at some point that there is a movie for it, but I haven't seen the movie yet. And just to be able to see, like, what do I gain differently from reading the book first as opposed to, like, seeing the movie first. So I'm kind of keeping my eye out for books like that just to see if there's any difference. I feel like there's going to be a lot of me like making predictions, and then maybe I'll watch the movie and be like, I was wrong in a bunch of places. um, but I'm curious to see like something like that where it's the other way around. But gotta get through this one first. Not too bad. I'd say like maybe 2/3 of the way. And the last section is not really part of the book. Without the movie for this story, Wesley is dead, and we wouldn't know about Miracle Max in spite of the foreshadowing. That's true. At this point, we would be just like, I think there would be much more like anxiety of like what's going on? How is this story going to end with a happy ending? Even though like the author, one of his little things is like their story has a happy ending, it's still like how though? Like it feels very dark and impossible. So I would say um, in the because you said you're reading along, um, Andark. The Your version of the book has extra stuff in the beginning. Does it also have like the start of another book in the very end called Buttercup's Baby, because there's like another whole like section. Yeah, it does. Okay. So I would say the binding, we're about 2/3 of the way. But if you take out that like first chapter of the next book, I would say we're like 75% of the way through, because there's like a big chunk. S. Morgenstern's Glorious Examination of Courage Matched Against the Death of the Heart, abridged by William Goldman. And it goes all the way to the end, like to the very last page. Anyway, I'm not going to spoil it by looking too far ahead. I just wanted to see, like, time-wise, how much more do we have to go. But I think we're getting pretty close, because it's like the wedding and then what? The honeymoon. And then some other stuff. So, yeah, we're almost there. Hi there. Thanks for joining our book club. If you'd like to join the conversation, I would love it if you would leave us a comment. And if you'd like to see more, check out the playlist.